The president's performance described in turns as aggressive, frustrated, and strikingly partisan. Here's a little sampling of the reaction.
If you heard it and you didn't know when it was, you might think that the election campaign was still in full swing. I mean, it was unusually partisan.
Well, I would sum it up in two words: frustration and resignation.
Well, the tone of this address was quite remarkable. He talked about Republicans being suspicious of Social Security and Medicare, about the oldest saw that you could hear from a Democrat. And then he added, and suspicious of government's role in making sure that impoverished children get food. Now, that's a little bit over the top. That's essentially a libel.
Joining me now, Pat Caddell, pollster for former President Carter and co-host of Political Insiders right here on FNC. Doug Schoen, also former advisor for President Bill Clinton and co-host of Political Insiders. And Kirsten Powers, Daily Beast columnist and a Fox News contributor, as are the other two gentlemen. Okay, so we've been playing sound bites from the president throughout the broadcast, and we played some going into Michael Reagan. So I think the viewers by now have a sense of how the tone was, and we played it in full yesterday. But the president did seem a little irritated with some of the questions, in particular when Major Garrett, now of CBS News, questioned him about how he voted against raising the debt ceiling when he was a senator, but now thinks it's out of line for these House Republicans to be threatening to do the same. And he didn't seem very happy with the questions or with what's happening right now politically. Your take on what we saw, Pat?
Well, my take was that, of course he's unhappy. The president right now is in a mode in which he is king, and he is out to destroy the Republicans, and they're aiding him every way they can. And he can get up and say what he wants. I thought was, Garrett, the questions that Major Garrett asked were right on target and about the history of this. He acted like it was, and he read from his teleprompter. The most unbelievable statement of all, which no one questioned, was he was saying we're very close to being able to stabilize our debt and the deficit. This is insanity. He is making a case on how we stop corporate loopholes after his White House, after Biden demanded that they put all those loopholes in the fiscal deal. The president is disingenuous beyond belief. And of course he's irritated. He doesn't want to be questioned. But he is walking a very tight rope here on this, very thin-edged.
I want to ask you, Doug, because you worked for President Clinton, who I just mentioned with Michael Reagan, this National Journal article today that talks about, among others, Bill Clinton and his ability to reach across the aisle and make deals with people he didn't necessarily love politically, but he felt was important to have a relationship with. And the question is whether comments like the one Charles Krauthammer referenced about the Republicans being suspicious of government feeding hungry children, we have it teed up, help in this president's ability to do that. Let's play the soundbite, and then I'll get your reaction. This is the on suspicion. Take a listen.
They have suspicions about Social Security. They have suspicions about whether government should make sure that kids in poverty are getting enough to eat, or whether we should be spending money on medical research. So they've got a particular view of what government should do and should be.
Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine a tone and an approach, Megyn, that is more different than the one President Clinton took. We do have clear issues, as Pat was alluding to, with the debt and the deficit. They're not solved. And the debt ceiling, while it's an important hurdle, and I don't want to default, and I think the president substantively was right, we can't be a deadbeat nation, nor can we be a totally polarized nation, nor can we pit one party against the other and see life as a zero-sum society. President Clinton believed, and he got a balanced budget deal from Newt Gingrich, somebody with a diametrically opposite philosophy, because he reached out across the aisle. We have to deal with entitlements. It's not a question of not wanting to take care of old people or poor people or feeding poor children. I think everybody believes we should. It's how, at what extent, and in what way can we afford it. Bottom line, I thought the president's tone was unfortunate. He did it in the press conference right after the election, and I think that ultimately it does the American people a disservice.
But Kirsten, you read some of the left-wing pundits and their opinion pieces today, and they've had it with President Obama, in their view, bending in these discussions with the left. They think, he extended the Bush tax cuts, a couple years ago. This time he said he wasn't going to extend them for anybody over 250, and he wound up extending them up to 400 and 450. And they see him talking tough on the debt debt ceiling now, but they think he's likely to cave on that. And they like the tough talk. And they think it's the Republicans who are the ones who are obstinate. And they sort of see it as, I guess, a tit for tat.
Yeah, but there's a real juvenile element to this because, look, there are plenty of differences and plenty of criticisms to be made about the Republican Party. But to set up this paradigm where they like to starve children, or where they actually are suspicious of Social Security, which really isn't true, that there are some real policy differences on how to approach the situation of Social Security spending. But why does the president need to set it up and so demonize Republicans when
Look,
I think there's plenty of valid criticisms that he could make without doing that, and he's doing that precisely because the left, in the same way the right likes it when Republicans do it, they like this kind of petulant, nasty tone because they view that as strength. When of course it's the opposite of strength. Strength would be coming out of being a leader.
Well, that's the thing is there's a question we touched on this with Michael. Should the president be above that? Does he have an obligation to the country to be above that? And I want to ask you while I have you here about the breaking news we got an hour ago. Is it beyond the pale for him to now be, we understand, flanking himself with some of the nation's children when he's pushing a policy agenda on something as controversial as gun control, as we just learned an hour ago he's going to do tomorrow? He's going to flank himself with little children who have written to the White House. Pat, you take your thoughts on it.
This is just a continuation of being juvenile to some extent and playing the card that he has. And Kristen's right, and so is Doug. But look, 77% of the people in the Gallup poll said they think politics in Washington, and that includes President Obama, are doing serious harm to the country. That's both parties. That's a disagreement. This president, frankly, I haven't seen anyone since Richard Nixon with the same instinct for being isolated, for being surrounded by cronies, and making up things the way he does. This is not Ronald Reagan. It's not Jimmy Carter. It's not even George Bush, for God's sakes. This is, it's a little bit much. The children thing is, I think, right over the top, so that he can propose things, executive action that says, I don't need the Congress. I mean, he is pushing the envelope here, but as long as the press doesn't challenge him, as long as Democrats allow him to give tax breaks to corporations and to rich people, then, I don't know when he gets stopped, because it won't be the Republicans. They can't get themselves out of a wet paper bag.
Doug?
Yeah, I must say, I differ slightly with Pat. I think if the president uses children as a platform to talk about the kind of bipartisanship I think we all believe
but
is
that's
necessary.
not what he's talking about, Doug.
Pat, I think we have a crisis with guns, and it's one thing to demonize your political enemies. It's another thing to look to children to try to promote a set of concerns about
to promote the political agenda
for guns.
Of a party and a group of people.
It's about guns and killing children, not
if you think
about
that's
a political
the single solution, that's not what the American people believe is the only answer.
Pat, 90% of the American people want background checks. Assault weapons are rejected.
They also want security.
We've got to do something. Children were killed.
I got to get to Kirsten.
Sorry.
She's going to mediate this dispute. And tell us what she
Promote
thinks.
Bipartisanship.
I don't want to get in the middle of this.
I know.
You should.
I didn't either. That's why I put you there.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I mean, it's a little dicey, but I think I'm with Doug on this. I think it's an important issue. These are kids that wrote in about the issue, so it is something that is of concern to them. And I don't think the president is going to do things through executive order. At least that's my understanding of things. I think he's going to try to do something that's more acceptable to most people, like doing a universal background check, which is pretty non-controversial, I think.
Yeah, we'll see.
What we're not going to do, Kirsten, is he's not proposing a bipartisan solution to do health, about mental health, to do stuff about security
We
in
haven't
schools,
heard any leaks
and
about
most
that.
of all about Hollywood.
We don't know. We have to wait to see.
The
Cuomo did in
violence
New
in
York.
Hollywood,
All right.
none of which is on the agenda.
This is borrowed
for Mayor
trouble.
Bloomberg
Borrowed
and
worry,
a
as
lot of
Nana would
these
say.
knee-jerk
We're going to
people
find
on
out
gun
22
control.
hours. He's going to tell us what it is, so then we'll have you all back and we'll debate. All right, thank you all.